Have you ever felt like conversations about US taxes and the national debt are just intentionally confusing? Well, you are definitely not alone. In the next few minutes, we're going to cut right through all that political fog, bust some of the biggest myths out there, and get to the hard numbers behind it all.
Let's kick things off with a quote that really sets the stage. It's a pretty bold statement, I know, but it perfectly captures what we're trying to do here. You see, the promises we hear about taxes often sound so simple, but the actual reality of the federal budget, yeah, that's a whole different story.
So, who's our guide through this maze? We're leaning on the fantastic analysis of Jessica Riedl, a senior fellow over at the Manhattan Institute. Her work was featured on Freakonomics Radio, and we're breaking down her super sharp, data-driven insights to give you the clearest picture we possibly can. All right, let's dive right into our first myth, and trust me, it's a big one. You hear it constantly, this idea that we can solve all of our budget problems just by taxing the wealthiest Americans a lot more. I mean, it's an incredibly popular idea, right? It feels fair to a lot of people, and it sounds so straightforward. But the real question, the one that actually matters, is this. Does the math even work? Let's find out. So the myth is that this is some kind of silver bullet solution. And let's be super clear. Raising taxes on the wealthy would bring in more money, no doubt about it. But the reality is the budget hole we're trying to fill is just so unbelievably massive that this one policy, it just can't do it alone, not even close. In fact, when you actually run the numbers, the absolute maximum amount of money you could realistically raise from the top earners is just a tiny fraction of the multi-trillion-dollar budget gap we're facing year after year. The key takeaway here is that it's simply not a standalone solution. And that brings us to another common scapegoat. Okay, so let's talk about myth number 2. Foreign aid. This is another area you hear about all the time, right? It's often painted as this huge pot of wasteful spending that we could just cut to balance our budget. So could we solve our debt problems just by keeping all that money here at home? Before I show you the answer, just take a quick guess. What percentage of the entire US federal budget do you think goes to foreign aid? 10%? Maybe 5? Lock in your answer. Okay, you got your number? The reality is often pretty shocking to people. It's not 10%, it's not 5%, it is less than 1% of all federal spending. This is genuinely one of the biggest disconnects between what people think and what the budget reality actually is. I mean, just look at this comparison. See that tiny little sliver representing foreign aid? Now look at the giant towers for Social Security and healthcare. They are not even in the same universe. You could eliminate every single dollar of foreign aid tomorrow, and it would barely make a ripple in the national debt. Okay, so if these super popular fixes don't actually fix anything, we have to look past the political talking points. We have to ask a much more important question. We've just seen that the two most common scapegoats, taxing the rich and cutting foreign aid, they just can't carry the weight of this problem. So this is where we have to shift our focus. So what are the structural drivers of the US national debt? Where is all the money actually going? And here it is. This is the answer. The overwhelming majority of all federal spending is packed into just a few key areas. You've got Social Security and healthcare, which includes things like Medicare. Together, they make up nearly half the entire budget. That's largely driven by our aging population and rising medical costs. Then you have national defense. And when you add in the interest we have to pay on the debt itself, well, you've just accounted for about 75% of all spending. This is the mathematical reality. Any serious, honest conversation about the debt has to start right here. So why does any of this matter? Why is it so crucial to separate these myths from the actual reality? Because knowing these numbers is empowering. Seriously, when you know the basic facts of the budget, you can cut right through the political noise. You can see past the easy, distracting answers and start focusing on the real, and yeah, admittedly very difficult, choices that we face. So let's do a super quick recap. The simple fixes that were so often sold, they just don't add up. Taxing the rich is not a silver bullet, and cutting foreign aid is basically a rounding error. The necessary conversation we need to have is about the major programs, Social Security, healthcare, and defense, because that's where almost all the money is going. So I'll leave you with this final thought. Now that you're armed with the real numbers, the next time you hear a politician make a simple promise about taxes, ask yourself this. Are they actually addressing the multi-trillion-dollar reality of Social Security and healthcare? Or are they just trying to distract you with a myth that's barely a drop in the bucket?